What's happening, my cinephiles? Thank you for joining us today on Cinema Recap. Glad to have you guys here. So, today we're going to check out a movie called Border. Spoilers ahead. We meet Tina, a customs officer and a bug lover with a gentle heart. She also has a funny face that people tend to laugh at, but we know that it's not her fault. She's doing her job, watching people head through the airport with their bags. Tina has a unique gift. She has an incredibly impressive sense of smell, and even knew that guy had several liters of liquor in his bag without opening it. Now Tina's driving deep into a wooded area, but it looks like this is where she lives. There's a lot of dogs barking at her, almost like they don't like her for some reason. When she goes into the house, a man inside stops another dog from running to the door. Now Tina's the type to enjoy walks through nature barefoot and spends time with the wildlife. Might have something to do with that impressive sniffer. Speaking of her smelling superpower, she's at work again and calls a man over to have his bags inspected. Her coworker didn't find anything suspicious until she checked the gentleman's phone, finding an SD card. Not sure what's on that little card, but the man tried to eat it, so it must be important. Not long later, Tina's sniffing out more of the travelers when she runs into a man who has an equally caveman-like face to hers, and she immediately seems unsure about his smell. While searching through his things, she finds a small jar of mealworms and a funny-looking tin that he said was a larva hatcher. He then asks her if she likes insects, which we can assume she does, but she refuses to say anything. She lets him leave, but it's obvious she's a little unsettled. Now Tina's heading to a nursing home to visit her dad, who seems a little confused at first. He does remember her, but appears to be having some memory problems. They head to an outside area to talk, and he asks her about her relationship with Roland, her roommate. She says that they're not intimate, but she enjoys having someone around to keep her company, and that he's a really nice guy. Later that night, Tina decides to spend some time outside. She has a way with animals, or at least moose. Now Tina's back at work again. Her boss is talking to her about the man with the SD card and how she knew that there was something wrong with him. They aren't sure what's on the card yet, but they suspect that the man knows about an area of the city that they have been trying to gather info on. Unfortunately, she can't get a warrant without a lead, which might be something that Tina can help her with. She seems to be good with animals, but Roland's dogs don't like her. Roland has some company over, so she decides to take a dip in a nearby river, just like we knew. Next, we find our strange man with mealworms on a ship of some kind. He's hogging that meat from the buffet and eating like an animal with his bare hands. Upon his trip back, he visits Tina at customs again. She has his bags inspected, but there's nothing to be found. She says that she can smell something on him, so her partner takes her back for further inspection. Now while they're gone, she spent some time sniffing the man's clothes. When her partner comes back, he tells her that it was embarrassing because the man is actually a woman and that she has a scar over her tailbone. It's obvious that Tina starts to think about the comparisons with herself and goes to speak with this person and gives him an apology. Even though this individual has the parts of a woman, it appears that they would prefer to be considered male. Now Tina's new interest doesn't seem upset with her and makes a comment about a hostel nearby that they may be staying at, hinting for her to come and visit them to talk. As they were leaving to go their separate ways, he says that his name is Vor. She remains curious about the similarities and asks her father about her tailbone scar during her evening visit with him. He says that she fell on something sharp when she was like 3 years old. Tina doesn't seem completely convinced about that, but she doesn't argue with her father. Now on her way home, her neighbor stops her. His wife has gone into labor, and he asks her to drive him to the hospital. Well, she's a good person and helps him out, but after dropping him off, Tina acts strangely, as if the hospital gives her bad memories. And when she gets back home, she wants to go to bed, but Roland decides he wants to be frisky. This ends with him landing on the floor in his underwear. Now the next day, Tina decided to visit the hostel that Vor was staying at. She finds him outside collecting his little mealworms and maggots. He asks if she'd like to eat one and shows her that they're not so gross. He feeds her one and she doesn't really complain. Vor mentions that the hostel is gloomy, but there's nowhere else for him to stay, so Tina suggests that they stay with her and Roland in a guest house. Roland's dogs were barking like usual, and Vor put him in their place with a nasty growl and snarl. Tina shows him the guest house, which is pretty cozy for what it is. Vor asks her about a scar on her temple, and she tells him that she was struck by lightning as a kid. That's when Vor shows her his scar on his neck and shoulder from when he was also struck by lightning. Vor and Tina share an awkward moment when he makes a move to kiss her. Now it's the next day, and the woman, Agneta, that Tina was talking to about the man with the SD card, has her out on the streets, sniffing for whoever she thinks could be involved. She sees a man on a bike and says that there's something up with him and decides to follow. Upon investigating, she finds an apartment that feels wrong to her, but they open the door and scared her and the male partner she had away. They go back and tell Agneta that Tina thinks they're doing something bad to a child and they need to get inside. Cut back to Tina outside at the river by her house again. She's foraging and enjoying nature. Her new friend Vor sees her outside and strikes up a convo. Tina talks about how she always thought she was special, but that she eventually realized she was only an ugly human with a chromosome flaw. Vor doesn't see her that way and says that she has no flaws, and that being different from others only makes her better than them anyways. Well, this flatters Tina, but then she mentions that she's always been ashamed of her anatomy and that she can't have children. Now we find Tina at her neighbor's house, visiting them after they had their baby. While she's there, Vor shows up asking to borrow a saucepan for some food. While he's there, Vor dotes on the baby and talks about how adorable she is. Now later that night, we see Vor back at the guest cabin, struggling like he's in pain. He heads out to the woods and screams as if he's in labor, because maybe he is? Hey, it's possible since he does have female anatomy. Another day has passed now, and Tina's back at the apartment building. Her and her partner know the routine of the residence now and pick the lock to get inside when they know it's empty. They search around, Tina sniffing like a bloodhound, eventually landing on a trophy on a shelf. Inside was a camera with some disturbing video evidence. When they get the man back for questioning, he denies everything and says that he has nothing to do with it, even with all the evidence to support otherwise. So Tina gets back home and Roland is talking about how weird he thinks Vor is. Meanwhile, Vor is smashing some mealworms to give to something we can't see. He then puts a box in a refrigerator, but we're not sure what's inside. Roland heads off to another dog show, and Tina and Vor are not alone on the property. A storm rolls through, and Tina's clearly having anxiety over it. Vor shows up at her door, afraid of the storm as well. They both hide and comfort one another under the dining room table. When the storm settled, the two headed back outside and had a very passionate, awkward, and spiritually awakened romp in the forest. After that, Tina asks Vor what she is, hoping that he'll have the answers. He tells her that they are trolls. It was like the two of them had found their soulmate and enjoyed their time in nature together, running through the forest and swimming in the river. Vor says that there's a small group of trolls in Finland, but they're always moving. He hopes they'll find him and Tina one day. Now it's another day, and Tina's heading back into town for work at the customs department. Her partner points out that it's been a while since she took a vacation. When Tina gets back home, laying in the forest with Vor, she asks why he didn't tell her what she was sooner. He says that she had adapted to human life and had a job, so he didn't want to disturb that. He then tells her that he dislikes all humans because they're parasites that only use everything on this earth. His parents were experimented on for years before they died, and he was passed around to different orphanages and abused his entire childhood. Vor mentions that humans are afraid of the trolls because they know that vengeance is coming, something that seemed to concern Tina because she doesn't believe that all humans are evil. He then tells Tina that her father has been lying to her for her entire life and that he's not her true biological parent. Like most people who find out where they really came from, Tina decides to visit him in the nursing home and ask him the hard questions. He acts as if he doesn't understand what she's talking about and grows quickly upset and frustrated. His yelling attracts a nurse and Tina is asked to leave without any answers. So Tina returns home in a really sour mood. She's had enough of Roland and his annoying dogs and kicks him out of the house. Maybe she's starting to share those same feelings about humans that Vor does. And speaking of Vor, she visits his cabin, finding the refrigerator taped shut. When she asks, he tells her that it's private. She can't help but wonder what's in that fridge. She removes the tape and finds the box inside, opens that lid to find a little pink baby inside. It's still moving and seems alive. She panics, puts that lid back on and returns it to the fridge. We find Tina now back in town working for Agneta. They're questioning the woman who lived in the apartment with the men who were recently arrested. She says that she doesn't know where the children were coming from, but Tina can smell her lies. She says that Patrick, the main guy involved, is the only one who knows the person. Meanwhile, Patrick is being transported with two cops when they're stopped by a random moose on the road. We briefly catch Vor walking around the vehicle and grab Patrick from the back Before the cops could even get out, he had already smashed the man's head against the road and killed him. When Tina arrived, she knew from his scent that it was Vore, but she lied to Agneta and said that she couldn't smell anything. So after they left, Tina went searching for him in the woods. When she found him, Vore tells her that he had to kill Patrick before he started talking. She knew that meant he was involved, and he admits that he steals human children and sells them to people like Patrick. Tina's furious at this information and then asks him about the baby in the fridge. He tells her that it's called a hisset, which is essentially an unfertilized egg that can only eat and sleep. He says that they're like changelings from European folklore, and he gives birth to them semi-frequently. He sometimes uses them as replacements for the human babies that he steals. Vore's not feeling bad about this at all, saying that he doesn't care what happens to humans or their offspring. Tina's filled with rage by everything he's telling her and growls angrily until he backs down. She's beyond angry with him and leaves that cabin. Now she's feeling sick and sad, doesn't know what she should do. She decides to de-stress with a little walk through nature, snacking on bugs and worms like the troll that she is. And while she's out, she stops by her neighbor's house and notices an ambulance there. When she goes inside, she finds out that their young baby had been replaced by that changeling or hisset that was in Vore's refrigerator. Tina knows exactly what has happened and goes back to the cabin. She finds a note that says, "You're not human, meet me at the ferry." Tina's infuriated that he would do such a thing, especially to her neighbors, and knows that this is her chance to make things right. So that night, Tina meets Vore at that ferry like the note said. He tells her that they have an obligation to carry on their species and that it's not too late. Well, she seems tempted, but then she says that she can't because she doesn't see the point of evil. And when he asks her if she would rather be human, she tells him that if it means that she doesn't want to hurt anyone, then yeah. And when she walks away, the police are waiting to arrest him. Agneta's there, and before they can take Vore in, he breaks free, jumps over the edge of the boat and into the water. He straight up disappears, but I have a feeling that he survives. Sometime later, Tina's father's visiting her house. He decided that he wants to tell her the truth of her parents and birth. He tells her that he was a caretaker at a psychiatric hospital called St. Jorgen, which is where he met her parents. He says that there were several like him at this hospital, but none of them lived for very long. He offered to take care of her, and her parents had accepted. Her real birth name was Riva. Her father tells her that they're buried behind the hospital in the cemetery, which is where she heads to next. Her awakening to her troll nature has a profound effect on Tina from that point on, as she lets her property go and doesn't even use her car anymore. She finds a box left on her porch, and when she opens it, there's a baby inside. Not a hisset, but a real baby, with a tail. Well, viewers, that was the end of our recap for the movie Border. Also produced by Metafilm Stockholm, Black Spark Film and TV, and Karn Film. Why don't you drop those comments below with the hashtag Cinema Recap. Please hit a like and subscribe if you're not already with us. And as always, guys, till next time.